my nephew's daughter-in-law.
Oh, nephew's daughter-in-law.
Uh, so nephew's son and daughter-in-law, they are there, and so she is the granddaughter. For me, she is the granddaughter.
Very good. She's so privileged, Dr. Bayu.
Sorry, I had technical issues. I've started recording. Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai.
I want to read the How to Love God.
Please go ahead. The pleasure is all mine to invite you to read it. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm self-invited, but it's okay. How to love God. To love God in the most practical way is to love our fellow beings. If we feel for others in the same way as we feel for our own dear ones, love God. If instead of seeing faults in others, we look within ourselves, we are loving God. If instead of robbing others to help ourselves, we rob ourselves to help others, we are loving God. If we suffer in the sufferings of others and feel happy in the happiness of others, we are loving God. If instead of worrying over our misfortunes, we think of ourselves more fortunate than many, many others, we are loving God. If we endure our lot with patience and contentment, accepting it as His will, we are loving God. If we understand and feel that the greatest act of devotion and worship to God is not to hurt or harm any of His beings, we are loving God. To love God as He ought to be loved, we must live for God and die for God, knowing that the goal of all life is to love God and find Him in our own self. Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai.
Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Thank you so much for reading the message. And let me just open up the files. I had a little charts.
Remember, I drew this chart in our first reading.
Yes,
Yes.
this one. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought if I draw it, I'll become seventh plane quickly.
You already are. Okay, so where are we? We are doing the seventh session of reading of God Speaks, and we have finished. I mean, we've covered 19 pages, and we continue from that point on. We are reading a chapter which is called the part initial urge. We read the whim in beams and then came back to this. So that's where we are. Any comments before we get started? Okay, so let me get started by reading from this point on. Atar Meher Baba Ki Jai. While the consciousness of the soul associates itself with the most first species of worm form, it experiences and exhausts the impressions of the most last species of the vegetable form. When all the impressions of the most last species of vegetable form are completely exhausted or spent through the diverse experiences had by the soul while identified with the most first species of worm form, then this most first species of worm form is dropped or disassociated, and the soul is once again without any form, although it is conscious of the impressions of the most first species of worm form. These impressions of the most first species of worm form must be experienced and exhausted. Therefore, the consciousness of the soul associates itself with another appropriate medium and tends the soul to identify with the most next species of worm form. This medium of the most next species of worm form is nothing other than the consolidated mold of the impressions of the most first species of worm form. Species after species of worm form are thus molded and dropped, while the consciousness of the soul rapidly evolves through experiencing the varied impressions of worm forms through diverse species of worm forms. When the conscious soul is worm conscious and experiences itself as a worm in the gross world, the consciousness of the soul also has, for the first time, the experience of voluntary movement and also experiences that it is an animate creature. This worm conscious soul, in its travail to gain more and greater consciousness, also experiences itself in the gross world as an invertebrate, and at a later stage, in other states of vertebrate, limbless, creeping worm forms of diverse species. In other diverse species of worm form, the consciousness of the soul undergoes further varied experiences of voluntary movement through crawling, through pairs of legs, and sometimes through multiple pairs of legs, and sometimes through pairs of legs and pairs of wings. Sometimes the worm conscious soul in varied species of worm form realizes itself as possessing a hairy surface, sometimes a sometimes a smooth and silky, and sometimes a rough or scaly surface. Hide. The worm conscious soul also realizes more acutely that it has to struggle for its sustenance and also for its survival, and that it is endowed with sensation and life. This worm conscious soul, with further evolution of consciousness through greater and varied innumerable experiences of varied and multiple impressions of varied species of worm form, also experiences and realizes that it is an amphibian, that it has not only voluntary movement on earth, but also freedom and mobility in water. For our own convenience in understanding the evolution of consciousness more clearly, we include in the worm form the varied species of worms, varied species of insects, varied species of reptiles, and varied species of amphibia. In short, we include in the worm form all species that tend to crawl or that crawl in spite of having limbs, legs, and wings, or that are otherwise distinct from birds and quadrupeds. The stone and metal forms had no upright or erect stand. They were recumbent forms. Their posture was flat and horizontal. The vegetable form had an upright, erect stand. Now, the worm form is again of the recumbent type of form, which has no upright or erect stand, but is prone to have a prostrate posture. When the consciousness of the soul associates itself with the most last species of worm form, after experiencing all the impressions of the varied species of worm form, and when the conscious soul eventually drops or sheds this most last species of worm form after ages and cycles of multiple diverse experiences in the gross world. The conscious soul again finds itself without any association or identification with forms. But the consciousness of the soul is now centered in the impressions of the most last species of worm form just shed. These impressions must necessarily be exhausted through experience, and to get experience, a suitable medium is necessary. Therefore, the consciousness of the soul, being centered in the impressions of the most last species of worm form, associates with an appropriate medium and tends the soul to identify itself with the most first species of fish form in order to experience and exhaust the impressions of the most last species of worm form. This most first species of fish form is nothing other than the consolidated mold of the impressions of the most last species of worm form. I'll take a pause here, but basically, we went through the whole experiences of the worm form. The key things to take away is it's the first form, or it's the first kingdom, which has voluntary movement, which has varied textures. It has a recumbent form again. Recumbent is nothing but lying down. And it is amphibian. It can be amphibian in nature. It can be in water and it can be on land. And from there, we go to the go through all these experiences and forms that belong to this kingdom, and finally reach the fish kingdom, right? So that's where we are. Okay, I'll continue then. As soon as the impressions of the most last species of the worm form are exhausted through experiences, the most first species of the fish form is dropped or shed, because the consciousness of the soul disassociates from this most first species, and the conscious soul no longer identifies itself with that species. Although the conscious soul is now once again temporarily without form, yet the consciousness of the soul is centered in the impressions of the most first species of fish form. In order to experience these impressions of the most first species of fish form, the consciousness of the soul associates itself with a suitable medium and tends the conscious soul to identify itself as the most next species of fish form. This species is nothing but the consolidated mold of the impressions of the most first species of fish form. After ages and cycles, and after innumerable varied impressions of diverse species of fish forms are experienced and exhausted, the consciousness of the soul eventually associates itself with the most last species of fish form in order to experience and exhaust all the impressions of the most last but one species of fish form. Thus, the fish conscious soul, identifying with varied species of fish form, experiences in the gross world that it is a living creature in water, a vertebrate endowed with life, sensation, and voluntary motion, an animate creature with limbs, if any, modified into fins, and that it has to struggle for sustenance and for survival. The fish conscious soul does not experience an upright, erect stand, but it experiences itself as a recumbent that can never hold its head high and erect and assert an upright stand in the gross world. The fish conscious soul eventually sheds or drops its identity with the most last species of fish form as soon as this consciousness of the soul has experienced and exhausted all the impressions of the most last but one species of fish form. Thus, the conscious soul once again finds itself without identification with any form. but the consciousness of the soul is conscious of impressions of the most last species of fish form. These impressions of the most last species of fish form must be experienced and exhausted, and therefore the consciousness of the soul now associates with another suitable medium and thus tends the soul to identify itself with the most first species of bird form, which is but the consolidated mold of the impressions of the most last species of fish form. In the most first species of bird form, the consciousness of the soul experiences and exhausts the impressions of the most last species of fish form. When all the impressions are thus exhausted, the consciousness of the soul disassociates itself from the most first species of bird form, and the conscious soul drops or sheds its identity with the most first species of bird form. That is, the most first species of bird form is dropped. The conscious soul is once again without form, but it has consciousness centered in the impressions of the most first species of bird form. These impressions experienced and exhausted, and therefore the consciousness of the soul automatically associates itself with the most next species of bird form and tends the conscious soul to identify itself with the most next species of bird form, which species is but the consolidated mold of the impressions of the most first species of bird form. On and on, ages after ages, and cycles after cycles, this chain of successive associations and disassociations with varied species of a particular form moves onwards steadily and progressively and gives out innumerable different impressions to be experienced by the conscious soul. Directly and indirectly, these associations and disassociations of the consciousness of the soul are absolutely essential to keep the wheel of evolution of consciousness revolving. The evolution of gross forms is but a byproduct in the universal factory of evolution of consciousness. I think this is a line that deserves to be memorized and probably marked out.
I have one question here. It's
Sure.
a little bit scientific question. So,
Sure.
any soul goes to the 84 lakhs births, right? Before getting the consciousness and before getting the human birth, right? That's what Baba said, right? It's 84 lakhs
Correct.
something. So,
Correct.
yeah. So, is it like in the world, in the universe, the number of species exist are the same? Like 84 lakh, the species are existing on the right now in the universe. Maybe long time back there was a dinosaur, but some species were not there. Then evolution happened. But at one time, the number of species exist in the universe will be around 84 lakh or something like that. Can we?
So, good question. First, let's clarify the 84 lakh
Jai
number.
Baba,
Yeah, go ahead.
80, the 84 lakh number is only human life cycles. There are 50 crore species. You will come to read that in one of the subscripts or whatever you call it. Like, so there are almost 50 crore species, and then 84 lakh human life cycles, which consciousness of the soul has to undergo to get moksha or mukti, ordinary mukti, because every soul consciousness will get mukti. That is guaranteed. So 84 lakh life cycles is only for human form. But before that, you have almost 50 crore species that the soul consciousness needs to use those mediums to evolve consciousness.
I think it
That is
is
my
in one
understanding.
of the annexures, some
Yeah, it's in the supplement. You're
Yes.
right.
supplement. Yes.
If you
Yeah,
just go for
another thing
84
that I
lakh, if you
marked,
look at the appendix, you'll find it. Yeah.
Yes.
yeah, in the earlier, in the paragraph, the first line that I especially marks, ages after ages and cycles after cycles. So this is such a long journey, you know.
Yes.
This evolution of forms is I think we should not be putting a number in terms of time.
Yeah, it's very, I mean, if you think about, the whole
The
idea
84
of the,
lakhs, you can probably give a average human life multiplied by 84 lakhs is the period. But here it
uh,
is not like that. Never.
uh,
But you have to remember that space time exists only in the waking state, 16 hours. It's just
Right.
space time. Actually, it is an apparent thing, you know. So space time in reality doesn't exist except in this Mayavic illusion, you know, in this whole Mayavic dream. So if you try to calculate, because even between two births, human births, you are having a long interval. It can be 10 days, 100 days, 1,000 years, we don't know. So time, space don't matter here, frankly. You know, it's just this whole drama of consciousness of the soul going through these different evolutions. But I have one question, you know, what I am interested in knowing is these. See, one thing you read here is the consciousness of the soul. Okay, and then we also read the consciousness, the soul consciousness. The soul is conscious, and then you have the consciousness of the soul. So, what I'm interested in knowing is these species that we talks about, all the different kingdoms. Now, these species are already pre-designed with certain experiences that the consciousness of the soul needs to go through. He talks about the mold of impressions from the prior um, the prior experience that the soul consciousness has makes that particular form, or all these forms already predetermined. They are already there, except that the soul consciousness has to go through all these different species and experience those impressions. So I don't know whether I'm making the question, correct.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
Baba.
I wanted to tell this. Uh, is the form pre-existing and soul accepts that, or the soul evolves a form for the necessity of its experiences? That's the question.
yeah, that's a good question. That's a better
So
worded question of that than what Kama was trying to
soul
ask.
doesn't
But
evolve forms.
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
Soul,
hold
there
on
is
to that
no
for a minute.
nothing like
Hold on to that.
soul's consciousness. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Hold on to that for just 1 second. Ashish, is your question answered? This is a very important question. Five and a
Yeah,
half.
yeah,
Yeah, 5.5 crores, 84 lakhs. The two numbers. I hope it's clear now.
yes, yes.
Having said that, your question is logical and like you said, with the scientific bent of mind. So is it possible to arrive at a total number of species and also accommodate the extinct ones? I think it's possible, right? But whether it's close to 50 crores, I don't know, right? And because
Yeah,
quite honestly, the scientific definition of genus, species, and so on are uh, less encompassing than the way Baba sees it. Baba, and from a soul perspective, the consciousness of the soul perspective, the multiple species include gaseous forms. So that's almost chemistry and not biology, whereas science and species is biology and upwards, right? So what we are doing is physics, chemistry, and biology together. So I hope that I'm throwing more light to your thought process. I'm not
yeah,
giving you an
yes,
answer. I'm motivating you to think because it's for you to figure
yeah,
out.
yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Now, now let's take Kama's question. Kama's question redrafted better by Mohammed. So the question is: does the consciousness of the soul actually enforce or create the new species and forms,
We're not able to hear you properly.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Am
the
I
audio is
audible?
getting patchy.
Is it better now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Now better.
Okay. So I'll repeat the question then. The question is, does the consciousness of the soul push to create the new species based on the experiences of the earlier form, or are the forms already existing? Anybody wants to take a stab at answering this question?
As I see, with
Mm-hmm.
the genetic background, so there is an evolution, sort of need for a new idea, need for a new body, pushes the form already existing to create a new one in bits and pieces, and that becomes a species and then a genus and all that. That is how the genetic background uh, says. So new proteins are produced, new DNA sequence is created, and old one is modified. All these things are constantly happening in the nature. So this leads to new forms being evolved. And if you add Baba at this level, with the consciousness requiring or exhausting all the experiences of the previous form, is willing to go for a new, experience. So sort of pushes this momentum to form a new uh, entity. So that is how I look at it. So this is a sort of a continuous process wherein things are pushed as per the requirement or as per the development or the say enlargement of the consciousness. So that's how I look at it. So it is not
Yes.
pre-formed
I
form already there into which a consciousness gets in, but it is the creation,
yeah.
ongoing process.
Right. I think
Excellent.
this is independent. I think Mamaji gave a very good explanation actually.
Uh,
We did both the processes are independent.
And
The
parallel.
form that the soul needs to find to identify itself for its next level of growth, that that most suitable form it will get. It is not necessarily that each soul has to pass through all 50 crore. Because it
yes,
will depend on the sanskaras that it has gained, and it may jump forms. It doesn't that if there are like 5 crores warm forms, the soul doesn't have to pass through all 5 crores. It depends on its own sanskaras. That's what I would like to think. Likewise, I would like to think for the human 84 lakhs. 84 lakhs, I suppose, is the maximum that soul needs to form. Depending on its karma, it may skip this some of these numbers. I have
yes,
said the process. When we say it for humans, it also must be applying pre-human stages of
yes.
growth of consciousness.
And also you can add the grace of the master or
Yeah,
the
yes,
avatar. So
yes,
they can
yes.
jump, as Kama always says, he wants to go blindfolded right away to the topmost level of the realization. So that can also happen, skipping the 84 lakh algebraic or mathematical equation.
Jay Baba, I think yeah, doctor's explanation was quite succinct. I'm looking from a top-down approach here. This is my understanding that the consciousness of the soul mandatorily requires a form or a body. So, as we know, once you take the human form, there is no more evolution. It's only
Yes,
reincarnation, which is spending sanskaras, and involution, which is unwinding sanskaras. That is very clear. And during evolution, what we are reading now is basically winding sanskaras, right? We are taking all these impressions, because only by taking all these impressions, by winding sanskaras, the consciousness of the soul can evolve to reach the human kingdom, where it then starts to spend these sanskaras in human form, what we call as organic sanskaras, organic natural sanskaras, which are winding sanskaras, and inorganic, unnatural human sanskaras, which is the spending sanskaras during reincarnation. So the big picture is, without form, consciousness can't get liberated, can't get mukti, whether it's moksha, nirvikalpa samadhi, nirvana, whatever it is. So that is a fixed fact as such, as a kind of an equation, that the body can't exist without consciousness, because consciousness comes before the form, and consciousness of the soul requires a medium, and that is why you have to be on planet Earth. Like they say, there are 8,000 different worlds out there, spheres of existence, where you don't need a body and you're in bliss all the time. But only to get liberation, you need to come to planet Earth and go through all these duality of experiences. So in that sense, these forms are already kind of, it's like in a theater. Suppose you're doing a play, you want to create the background. So the background is created by the people who are involved in the play. So similarly, I feel that this whole divine dream, the consciousness, automatically these forms are existing, and you keep experiencing these forms. This is what I understood. Thanks. Jai Baba.
Any other comments or clarifications to extend this? Okay, so I mean, it's very useful discussion, but I'll just throw in one more idea to this whole thing. It's not. I agree with everything that has been said by both Mamaji and Kama. The only idea is uh, so it's a space-time construct on the speed of evolution. So the new forms get created in space-time. The frequency of new forms is very slow. So you can almost say there's no new forms. Okay, because it's so rare. Second, let's look at Baba. Let's look at the first soul going through this whole thing, right? So if you take that one, then there was obviously forms that needed to be created for the advancing stream of the consciousness of the soul, right? So at that time, it was more regular and more frequent. But now, as you said, the arithmetic completeness of all the possible impressional uh, um, aspects and attributes that are required, that is, the universe of sanskaric possibilities, is almost established. So all forms almost exist. So, you know, I don't know if I'm able to communicate what I'm trying to say, but I hope the others are getting it. So one is the idea that when the first soul goes through this journey, and the advancing stream of consciousness of the soul goes through these multiple forms, the forms actually get created. That's the first time. And then the species, genus, the scientific construct exists, and there is expansion of the possibilities, and new scientific new species get created, but the speed keeps going down. So the frequency of occurrence of new species is lesser and lesser, because the universe of all forms is almost complete. All possibilities are already there. So it's like a pack of cards, right? So if you have only 52 cards and all the cards are out in circulation, you have reached full status. There's no more cards. So I think that's what I wanted to convey.
Yes, so putting that into some for some more clarity, the human form is the ultimate. That's what you want to say.
Yes. Yes.
All the experiments are over, and we have found a say form which is ideal for the development of the consciousness further. There is no further form needed to say go through the say development of consciousness. So that's why we have the process of unwinding in say the human form.
Correct. I'll just be guarded in saying yes to that, in the
Yes.
sense that there could still be, yeah, that still could be, yeah, there still could be small nudges of extremity of a genus being explored by a species in the lower forms as well. But
Okay.
your point of consciousness reaching the pinnacle in the human form is absolute and confirmed. I mean, is absolutely true. In fact, it's not our statement or inference, it's Baba's statement. Baba says,
Baba. Yes.
yeah, Baba emphatically states that. So, yeah,
Yes.
that's, yeah. Okay, let's continue.
Jay Baba, uh,
Yeah.
I just had one thought which can also summarize what Mamaji said. So we can say that there are different paths or journeys for different souls based on their you know sanskaric construct or the karmic construct. So different people would have different paths. People, as in the different souls, would have different paths. Java.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and that's what Sanjay ji was also saying. So you may not necessarily have to. It's like the pack of cards, right? To jump on to the same analogy, you may get different sets of cards in your game, but you go through what you personally and uniquely identify and experience as an individual soul, as an individualized soul. Okay, let us continue. The bird conscious soul identifies with one species, then with the next, and then the next species of bird form, one after the other in regular succession until all the species of bird form are associated and disassociated alternately by the consciousness of the soul while experiencing multifarious impressions in the gross world, and thus the evolved consciousness of the conscious soul tends the soul to realize itself as bird in every species of the bird form. Though the soul is eternally without form and in the oversoul, yet the bird conscious soul consistently realizes that it is no other than a bird in the gross world, experiencing bird impressions on earth, on water, and in air. It realizes itself as a feathered vertebrate capable of flying in air. With the help of two legs, it maintains an erect stand. Eventually, after ages and cycles of experiences of varied species of bird form, the bird conscious soul sheds or drops the most last species of bird form as soon as the consciousness of the soul disassociates itself from the most last species of bird form, and the consciousness of the soul disassociates itself from the most last species of bird form as soon as the consciousness experiences and fully exhausts all the impressions of the most last but one species of bird form in the most last species of bird form. Again, the conscious soul experiences itself as being without any form for the time being, although the consciousness evolved further and greater is always there. In brackets, once consciousness is achieved by the soul, this consciousness goes on evolving more and more and can never be lost or devolved. This consciousness of the soul, without form, now gets centralized in the impressions of the most last species of bird form just dropped. These impressions must necessarily be spent or exhausted by the consciousness of the soul. Therefore, consciousness associates itself with a suitable medium and thus tends the conscious soul to identify itself with the most first species of animal form. Through this most first species of animal form, the consciousness of the soul experiences the impressions of the most last species of bird form that was dropped or from which it was disassociated. This most first species of animal form is nothing other than the consolidated mold of the impressions of the most last species of bird form shed. After innumerable and diverse experiences of the impressions of the most last species of bird form through the form of the most first species of animal form, the consciousness of the soul completely exhausts the impressions of the most last species of bird form and then automatically disassociates itself from identification with the most first species of animal form. In this manner, the form of that species is shed by the conscious soul, or the form of that species is said to have dropped or died. So, if you notice, for the first time, instead of consciousness associating and disassociating, the word died is used here, right? And this goes back to what we were talking last week in an animated conversation. I remember all of us discussed this. So, in the early forms, is there a concept of death? By this discovery of using the use of the word died, I believe semantically and even conceptually, the disassociation of the soul being treated as death can first be recognized from probably the animal form. Would that be a fair way of understanding this? Any
Maybe till the, say, as for biology is concerned, say there is a questionable concept of death in vegetable form. So there is a continuity there always seen. Many of the, say, vegetables do not have a strict cycle of a birth and a death. So the seed is alive all the time, and then it grows into a form and then creates new seeds and goes on. So here the concept of death is a bit difficult to define as we see in the animal forms. So to me, what you are driving at is almost very clear in the vegetable forms. But when we come to the animal form, each individual form has an end, whether you call
distinctly?
it as death or whatever it is, has an end. Uh, when it comes to human form, it is almost the same
Very
as
clear.
animal form.
Yeah, so only difference is, I think, in the worm and the bird kingdom, all of those are included in what you are calling biologically as
Yes, yes,
animal,
yes, yes, yes,
right? Whereas
yes,
Baba is using the concept of death for dissociation only in the animal kingdom after the worm and the bird are completed. Whereas biologically, the vegetable argument was very beautiful.
yes,
I
yes.
think that makes sense. But in the other species, it can be detected to be seeing an end of the form.
Yes.
But let's just keep this.
Maybe
Let's just
as
observe
we
this. Yeah,
say, this was in my mind for a long time, and Baba is now making it clear for me where I can understand vegetable to say living beings or animals or say forms other than vegetables. So this clarity is there, but maybe still some more time we may get some clarity on this issue. So I'll have to synthesize what is there in the scientific world with the clarity given by Baba. So that is a process we have to go through. So when we are mere scientists, things are different. When we are with Baba, Baba drives you to synthesize or amalgamate all that into one clear concept of the evolution of consciousness. That's a
Yes,
process we all have to go through.
indeed. Let's continue. Um, Again, the conscious soul with greater evolved consciousness finds itself without a form, although the consciousness of the soul is centered in the impressions of the form, just discarded or dropped, of the most first species of animal form. These impressions of the form, just dropped, of the most first species of animal form, must be experienced or exhausted by the consciousness of the soul, so that the conscious soul should not be aware of any impressions of any form, but be conscious only of the reality of its own infinite eternal state, without forms or impressions, and through knowledge the experience the oversoul. Throughout the travail of the soul, to gain that consciousness for itself, which would make it realize the reality of its self, biggest self, the conscious soul goes on and on in an apparently unending chain with its consciousness, endeavoring ceaselessly to experience and exhaust all impressions that centralize the consciousness of the soul, deviating this consciousness from the reality of eternal and infinite state of the biggest self, which is eternally in the oversoul, to the consciousness of duality of illusion of the gross world. Thus, the consciousness of the soul, in an effort to gain consciousness of the reality of the biggest self, is consistently shrouded in an envelope of ignorance.
I think you can
Therefore,
read that paragraph once again.
sure, I will do that. I'm repeating. These impressions of the form just dropped of the most first species of animal form must be experienced or exhausted by the consciousness of the soul, so that the conscious soul should not be aware of any impressions of any form, but be conscious only of the reality of its own infinite eternal state, without forms or impressions, and through knowledge experience the oversoul.
Here, one section I feel is very important. So that the conscious soul should not be aware of any impression of any form, but be conscious only of the reality of its own infinite eternal state. So till say till this stage, there is consciousness of the world, consciousness still lingering of the world forms. So that is being constantly shed. So from here onwards, the consciousness moves away from the form, tries to move, say, clear out all the impressions of the form, and becomes sort of conscious, formless consciousness. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, I feel that I understand your argument, but I think what you have to understand here is that when you reach the human form, there is no more evolution of forms.
Yes.
Okay. So up till the human form, consciousness is evolving. And consciousness can only evolve, it takes higher and higher forms in higher and higher kingdoms. That is the sequence. Then consciousness, when it comes into the human form, we know that it has become full and complete. So technically, it is Maha Chaitanya, super consciousness, but is covered by a layer of sanskaras, which has been accumulated through this journey through all these different kingdoms. So, what is happening now is in the human form, you have to again end these sanskaras, which is experiencing these sanskaras, reacting to your five physical senses. And then you reach a tipping point where you realize that I should not be attached to my form, especially the five physical senses.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then you are going into the involution phase by the grace of a master, where you start unwinding, which is basically intelligent action. So, what is happening is sanskaras are getting reduced. So, from gross sanskaras to subtle sanskaras to mental sanskaras, which becomes finer and finer. Where in the sixth plane, you're only observing God everywhere, except there is a duality between the subject and the object. And that is where the Sadguru comes, and he has to now remove the last layer of samskara, which creates this duality, even though you're only seeing God in the sixth plane. And that is the samskaras become zero, and consciousness immediately knows itself that it is Aham Brahmasmi. Jai
Yes.
Baba.
Yes. Thank you. So you
Super.
have connected where I went through, and then you took me further from there. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Very good explanation. Let's continue. I'm starting from the middle of the paragraph through. Throughout the travail of the soul to gain that consciousness for itself, which would make it realize the reality of itself, the conscious soul goes on and on in an apparently unending chain, with its consciousness endeavoring ceaselessly to experience and exhaust all impressions that centralize the consciousness of the soul, deviating this consciousness from the reality of the eternal and infinite state of the self, which is eternally in the oversoul, to the consciousness of duality of illusion of the gross world. Thus, the consciousness of the soul, in an effort to gain consciousness of the reality of the biggest self, is consistently shrouded in an envelope of ignorance.
Yes.
There are two, three things that I would like to underline here. Consciousness also apparently, yeah. So it's apparently unending, but we know there is an end. We also know there is a absolute end. The absolute end is the 84 lakh, right? It's because after that it's mathematically you're granted. Baba says, okay, you've had enough. Right? And out of compassion just says, okay, be done with it. So apparently, so it's ages and ages and cycles, to use another phrase that Baba has used earlier. So it's apparently unending, but it is an unending chain. And so the keyword that I in the second reading was much better, and thanks for nudging me to read this again. So the focus in the animal kingdom is for the first time focusing on the impressions and focusing on the fact that the, the true nature is shrouded. So though the consciousness is trying to tend towards and realize its true nature, which is that of infinity and of the oversoul, it is shrouded in ignorance. So that's the other phrase I wanted to, um, yeah, consistently shrouded, which is consistently shrouded in Ignorance.
Because ignorance is also there because it doesn't have self-knowledge. See, unless you reach the human form, then only you get full and complete consciousness, and only in full and complete consciousness will you be able to start dissolving your ignorance. Correct?
But even in the full capacity of the consciousness that's reached in the first human form, you're still shrouded in ignorance.
No, no, absolutely. So the
Yeah.
ignorance is there right up to the end. I mean, right up to
Exactly.
the sixth plane. The sixth plane
Yeah.
is also a minor, very finer form of ignorance,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
Because of
Yes.
samskaric impression. So technically, I think up till the human form, first human form, the soul consciousness has no control on anything. It is
Yes.
just like when you are in high school, you are thrown all those standard subjects that you have to study. So you only do bachelor's, master's, you are able to focus and specialize, right? So
Correct.
similarly, the analogy I see here is evolution is like going through primary school, secondary school, and then you have the opportunity to specialize, kind of thing. Otherwise, everybody has to do the same subjects, whether you have the aptitude for it or not. You know.
Yeah.
Deba.
But in this school, you have to do all subjects anyway. You, you have to, whether you have the aptitude or not, you have to go through all the subjects one time or the other.
Well, the paradox is you have to experience lust, greed, and anger in the animal form, which we need to dissolve in the human form. What a play! I mean, this is like a very inefficient business of life, as
Very
you call it.
inefficient. Beautiful phrase. Very
Right.
beautiful
The
phrase.
baby, the baby which is born doesn't, my niece just got born here day before yesterday at 2:21 p.m. in California. And I was just looking at the photograph and I was thinking about Baba's God Speaks, and that baby doesn't have any lust, greed, and anger, right? It takes like 7, 8 years for the samskaras to come out and all those kind of things.
Yes.
So when you look at this whole divine game, that is why Baba says in the end, this is all illusion. Because it's a paradox. First, you don't have any lust, greed, and anger. Then you develop all this through the animal kingdom, and this is you have no choice. You're thrown into the, like a gladiator in the arena with lions, kind of thing.
You're thrown to
Deva.
the wolves, yeah. Or
Thrown the
the
wolves.
lions
Yes.
or whatever. Yeah. Okay, let's continue. Next paragraph. Therefore, in order that the consciousness of the soul should experience and thus exhaust the impressions of the most first species of animal form, the consciousness of the soul now associates automatically with an appropriate medium which will permit and aid it to experience the impressions of the most first species of animal form. This association of the consciousness of the soul perforce tends the conscious soul to identify itself with the most next species of animal form. This most next species of animal form is no other than the consolidated mold of the impressions of the most first species of animal form. As soon as the impressions are experienced and exhausted through the most next species of animal form, this species is dropped by the conscious soul. The soul once again experiences that it is not identified with any gross form of the gross world. When the animal conscious soul is without any form, the consciousness of the soul is centered in the impressions of the most next species of animal form just dropped or shed. These impressions must also be experienced in order that they may be exhausted, and therefore the consciousness of the soul automatically associates itself with another medium, and this perforce tends the conscious soul to identify itself with the most next to the next species of the animal form. Again, the dreaded ages and cycles. After ages and cycles of varied and innumerable associations with and disassociations from diverse species of animal form, the consciousness of the soul eventually associates itself with that medium which tends the conscious soul to identify itself as being the most last species of the last species of animal form. I'll pause here. I have a question. Anybody has the book Creation and Its Causes, physical form? I think Singapore bought one, a copy of the book. I don't have it. There is a diagram in that which I'd like to share and discuss with the group. It's a diagram which is the cycle of this recumbent and vertical state of the seven kingdoms, with also certain features that are brought out in that diagram. This is Baba's diagram, recreated for the book. So I think it might be a good thing to go over that if we are able to find it, right? I tried even last week and I was not able to find it. So somebody with the book will surely have it as one of the pages of the diagram. So a request going out. Okay, let me continue. All throughout the experiences of the animal conscious soul, the soul identified itself through its consciousness with varied species of animals in the gross world, in water, on earth, and below the surface of the earth, and realized the experiences of an animate creature, usually as a quadrupedal organized being, four legs, endowed with life, sensation, and voluntary motion, and which all the while had to struggle for sustenance and survival, sometimes as a herbivore, as a herbivorous creature, and sometimes as a carnivorous creature. The animal form has no erect or upright posture and has a tendency to look down with drooping head. Apes, however, are the most evolved types of animals and they tend to stand erect like human beings. Ultimately, after ages and cycles, when all the impressions of the most last but one species of animal form are experienced and exhausted through the medium of the most last species of animal form, the consciousness of the soul disassociates itself from the most last species of animal form, and the conscious soul no longer identifies itself with this most last species of animal form. This form is disassociated by the consciousness of the soul and is dropped or shed. However, though the most last species of animal form is dropped or shed, the impressions of the most last species of animal form are left or retained, and the consciousness of the soul is centralized or focused on the impressions of the most last species of animal form. The conscious
I am
soul.
unable to see the book. Something happened.
Oh, okay. The others are, can
Maybe
anybody
my
else?
end. It is only my end, I think. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Maybe just
But I can
change
hear
your.
you. Quiet.
Okay. The
Doctor,
conscious
should I
soul,
give you a gift of a copy of God Speaks?
the physical book. Yeah.
I don't
The
have it in right. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah. The conscious soul is once again without form. These impressions must necessarily be experienced and exhausted, and hence the consciousness of the soul now associates itself with another suitable medium, and the soul perforce tends to identify itself through its own consciousness with the most first human form. Aha! This human form is no other than the consolidated mold or cast of the impressions of the most last species of animal form. Through the most first human form, the consciousness of the soul experiences and exhausts the impressions of the most last species of animal form. When all the impressions of the most last species of the animal form are experienced and exhausted by the consciousness of the soul, then the consciousness of the soul disassociates itself from the most first human form, and the conscious soul automatically drops or sheds the body association. This is called the death of the most first human form. But the consciousness of the soul is now focused or centralized in the impressions of the most first human form, and the soul is now temporarily without a form. In order that the impressions of the most first human form may be experienced and exhausted, the consciousness of the soul associates itself with another appropriate medium, and the conscious soul is thereupon inclined to identify itself with the most next human form, which form is no other than the consolidated mold or cast of the impressions of the most first human form just dropped or shed. This identification of the conscious soul with the next form and those following is called the birth of a human being. So the death we are seeing in the second kingdom, second time reference, we saw it in animal kingdom, and for the first time we use the word birth. I have a question here. It's been irritating me for the last 10 minutes, so let me verbalize it. Between births, animal or human, let's take for the purpose of this question just the human births. When I am in the heaven or hell state, is my consciousness of the soul still in ignorance, or does it recognize its true nature in the heaven or hell state? So I've dropped the body, I am going through the intensive experience of what happened in that birth, and also creating the blueprint for the next one. In all that, that's the consciousness of the soul. Still,
Disturbance in voice.
oh, sorry. So I am in that heaven or hell state between births. I'm repeating. And at that point, is the consciousness of my soul aware of its true nature of infinite power, or is it still shrouded in ignorance till we get to the sixth plane?
No, I don't
Yeah,
think
Baba.
it has the power.
No, no, go ahead.
Okay.
But
Okay, I have a follow-up question. Okay, Kama, do you have anything to say?
sorry, what did the Doc Mama say? I didn't hear that.
No. In
Doc Mama
the
says ignorance sustains. Ignorance will be there.
ignorance
Yes.
will be there, but there is no power as such to
Yeah,
reason
okay.
out or think
Leave
out.
power. Leave power for a power aside for a minute. My question was only about the existence of ignorance. So, from your answer, you suggest that ignorance continues. Kama, you are saying
Yes.
something.
I think that is correct in the big picture. The only thing is you don't have a gross form. The difference between dropping the physical body, so called death, is only the dropping of the gross form because you're taking the whole sanskaras. See, if you look at the human form itself, whatever we do when we are reacting, when we are spending sanskaras, you are actually reacting to the emotions, the feelings, the sanskaric impressions. And so the difference is that when you drop your body and go to the astral form, we know that we are seeing a recap of our human existence. So you are actually like a human being without a body. And then you are guided by the higher spirits, blah, blah, blah. And they tell you, like, and see, even now we know that I have to become liberated. That theoretical intellectual concept is still there within us
Yes,
as a human
yes,
being.
yes.
Only thing is, we are not executing it, or we are having those experiences in bits and pieces, correct? But our impressions are so strong that we are still caught up with our five senses or with the body. As Nisargadatta Maharaj says, like it's all because of the false identification with the body. And I think I again quote that beautiful statement in Godman Part 2. What is disastrous for the soul is not being conscious of creation, but consciousness gets caught up in creation. And what is also disastrous for the soul is not being conscious of the body, gross, subtle, mental, but consciousness gets identified with the body. So, what we are doing is the opposite. We are identified with our body. And that is why we are going through the so-called duality of experiences, suffering, and all that. But once you become detached with the body and understand it's only a media, just like God speaks, talks about all the different kingdoms, the mold of impressions, and we keep thinking about it, slowly you'll start detach yourself from the body and understand that whatever is happening to you is because of the body, and you're not the body. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So to answer your question, yes, ignorance is there in the other world, except you don't have a physical form. That's it. Yeah, Baba.
Yes.
very, very tragic. I agree with you, but very tragic in the sense that, as you rightly started your response, Kama, the academic knowledge of the true nature of the soul already exists, right? Already exists with the physical brain that
Yes,
I
you're
possess.
called a human being. You're a being.
Yes,
Yes, but we are
yes,
becoming.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
So I have this knowledge. I'm dropping my body, and still I am enveloped with sanskaric burden and ignorance, in spite of. See, now, again, pardon me if I'm sounding preposterous or egoistic. There are many people who do not recognize the existence of the soul, or the aspect of the soul, even, right? So here we are on this group, at least all of us talking about it, are convinced of that, are convinced of that nature academically. We have not experienced it, obviously, but we are convinced, we are logically convinced of it, and we believe in it, right? And I believe my sanskaric makeup will take me to, when I drop my body, that knowledge will not be lost, right? That knowledge
Yes.
will not be lost, but yet
Right.
I will be shrouded by ignorance to come back again. So it's very tragic. It breaks my heart. Okay.
It's not tragic, buddy. If you think of yourself as an actor, you're not doing this 24 hours. You're only doing it in the 16 hours of your waking state. That's why I say go to sleep for 12 hours. 50% you're fine, 50% you pass. And just wait for that 84 lakh to happen, you know.
Oh, it's enough. Please let me go. Minimum ordinary mukti. Anyway, that's me. Okay, let's continue. As soon as the consciousness of the soul associates with the most first human form, the evolution of consciousness is full and complete. So, this is what we talked about earlier. And again, the emphasis is so clear that it's in capital. I repeat, as soon as the consciousness of the soul associates with the most first human form, the evolution of consciousness is full and complete. And there is an asterisk and the first supplement reference or footnote. So let's take up both of them. Okay, first one. Uh, Meher Baba maintains that such subjects should no longer be left indefinite, although he concedes that belief or non belief in evolution and reincarnation does not in any way hasten or impedes man's spiritual progress. He tells us this is a very important point. I mean, maybe we have understood it, but it's a very important point. The belief or non belief does not hasten or impede man's spiritual progress. Beautifully said. He tells us that he tells us the spiritual significance of evolution and reincarnation in the following words. It is the evolutionary struggle that enables the soul to develop full consciousness as that in the human form, and the purpose having been achieved, the side issues or byproducts of evolutionary travel, the naksh e amal or sanskaras, have to be done away with while retaining the consciousness intact. The process of reincarnation, therefore, is to enable the soul to eliminate the sanskaras by passing through the furnace of pain and pleasure.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Now let's take up the first supplement, which is impressioned consciousness. We are coming here from page 27. That's what this number means. At the request of the editors, I think somebody needs to mute the phone mic. At the request of the editors, Meher Baba added the following information. 1 second. Yeah. Consciousness is definitely complete as soon as the first human form is taken, but it does not start involving at that point. When consciousness first begins to involve, it means that the human being is only beginning to take the first step on the spiritual path. Between the time of the first human incarnation and the time of going on the path, the complete consciousness of a human being, which is still an impressioned consciousness, has necessarily to indulge in a process that eventually must dislodge these impressions from retaining their hold on it. On what? The consciousness which is complete. It is to be noted that during that period, which covers thousands of reincarnations, the impressions which were hard set or dense get shaken up so thoroughly by the reincarnation process that their tight grip on consciousness becomes loose. These hard set, dense or gross impressions thin out or become feeble through innumerable and varied experiences of opposites. The limit to these experiences is reached by persistent reincarnations which give experiences of opposites. It is also to be noted that it is only when these dense, hard set or gross impressions become less dense or become feeble that the limit to the experiences of the gross world through gross impressions is reached by the gross medium, the human body. When the dense, hard set impressions become less dense, they no longer give rise to gross experiences because these less dense, feeble impressions are refined or fine and no longer crude or gross. The aggregate of such refined or fine impressions is called subtle impressions. These subtle impressions give rise to experiences of the subtle type, that is, pertaining to the subtle world. And the subtle body experiences these subtle impressions and tries to exhaust them. When these subtle impressions become even less dense and still more refined, the aggregate of such impressions is called mental impressions. These mental impressions give rise to experiences pertaining to the mental world, and the mental body experiences these mental impressions and tries to exhaust them. When the last traces of the mental impressions are exhausted through experiences by the mental body, the complete consciousness of the soul, which was all along in the grip of impressions from the instant it identified itself with the most first human form up to the last human form, which is the mental conscious human being, is unburdened of impressions. Only such impressionless complete consciousness can realize the final experience of the I am God state of the soul. If you guys didn't realize, the question I asked is exactly being addressed in great detail by Baba in this supplement. I mean, it's not in verbatim the way I asked it, but that's what he's saying. So he's bringing out the fact that the consciousness will be shrouded and continue to be shrouded till the last step, which is the final experience. When the gross or hard
Only point that I can tell you is that what is the importance of the astral world or your journey in the astral world? So one point is you are experiencing all the impression, their effect on you without the body, with the dissociation of the body. So while in the body, we are not able to dissociate the body and think of impressions or learn from the impressions. So very difficult because we are always attached to the body, and we react, we get the pain, pleasure, everything through the body. But in the astral world, you become a witness for that, sort of a witness. So that is also a learning phase in the path, I feel. Hey, Baba.
Correct.
Very good distinction.
Very well said. Yes.
Yeah, very well said. I think you act as the POW, you pure observer witness
Yes.
in without the space time limitation and and the body limitation. You experience the whole thing again. Uh, yeah, but the tragic part remains is that in spite of the academic knowledge, you still are ignorant.
Yes.
Okay.
Karthik, you shouldn't
So,
say the use the word tragic,
yeah.
creates a
No, it
negative
is
vibe. You
tragic.
should say like I'm having fun
No,
with the movie. Like,
yeah, but it's like, hey, I know this, but I am not able to get out of it, right? So that's what's irritating me. So I know this, but I'm not able to get out of it, right? That's what should I say? I would use another strong negative word. I'm sorry to say it's frustrating, right? But I that's where I'll convert it to uh, a request or uh, a pleading to Baba using a positive term of his infinite compassion to get us MOM, right? So anyway, let us see what he does. Let's continue.
so,
When the
so just in a
cross,
hypothetical example, once again, sorry.
sure, sure,
Suppose
sure.
your son says like, Dad,
Hmm.
I don't feel tragic about life, but why do you keep saying that? How would you respond? Like,
Uh, See, I would give him the full 9 yards of the divine theme and explain and justify my answer, my statement. The statement is that the tragedy is uh, pure academic understanding and knowledge is still very limiting because you have to go through the experiences to actually uh, own that knowledge or become that knowledge or become that, which is at a level disappointing to say the least, and at another level tragic and frustrating.
but what if he says like, why don't you keep that to yourself? I'm just
Okay.
kidding. I'm just trying to
Yeah,
pull your
yeah.
leg. Okay.
No, he has the right to say that, and so do you.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Most likely
I,
answer.
yes, I will mope in my corner, guys. Let me mope in my corner. Anyway, let me continue. When the gross or hard set impressions get thinned out by the reincarnation process, they become subtle impressions. These subtle impressions can no longer give rise to the experiences of the gross world. At this stage, the consciousness of the gross conscious human being automatically begins to indulge in experiences of the subtle world. This marks the advent of the process of involution of consciousness, and the aspirant begins to tread the path, big P. It is obvious that the subtle impressions must give rise to the subtle experiences of the subtle world. These subtle impressions get exhausted by the subtle body through experiences of the subtle world, and the process of involution of consciousness continues. So, that is the first supplement. And there was an asterisk here, but it's a minor point. It's just what I already said. Parenthetical numbers refer to the page number of this book where the supplement reference came from. So let's get back, and we are here, and let's finish the part. So I'll restart from the beginning of this paragraph. As soon as the consciousness of the soul associates with the most first human form, the evolution of consciousness is full and complete. Because the consciousness of the soul is fully developed in human form, the evolution of form is also complete, and no new higher forms are now evolved once the conscious soul identifies itself with the most first human form. In short, in human form, the consciousness of the soul is full and complete. The process of evolution of consciousness is brought to a standstill. The human form is the highest and the most sublime form evolved during the evolution of consciousness. Hence, in the human being, consciousness is fully developed, and the form, molded and cast after ages and cycles, is the most perfect form or medium. The consciousness of the soul, therefore, utilizes this perfect medium to experience and completely exhaust all impressions, so that the fully conscious soul becomes devoid of any impression whatsoever, and thus is able to realize its own real, eternal, and infinite state in the oversoul. Great. So let's take up the next part, part 3, characteristics of the different kingdoms, in the next session. Any passing comments and questions?
Today, there was a lot of awakening for me. So many things which were in my mind were cleared out. I was able to go ahead with a proper understanding. Thank you, Baba.
Thank you, Baba. Yes, thank you for the lovely discussions, interventions, and questions from all of you. No, you guys are crazy?
Huh?
No, I'm asking Nomita. So you think we guys are crazy? Discussing at length like this?
She's
By
not.
the way, I'm sitting in Mehrabad. I'm sitting right in front of the Samadhi at the
Oh,
stage part, listening. So
Wonderful.
I'll go to Seclusion Hill today, hopefully.
Wonderful. Merazad today, yes, Sunday.
So hope to see you guys. I don't know, Sanjay Nigam, is he going to be there?
I'm not sure if Sanjay G is there, but I think Sunil may be in
Sunil is
Mehrabad.
coming on the 25th. Yeah, he'll be
Yes,
coming
yes,
up from
yes.
meeting in Pune. I said.
Yeah. Okay, so everybody have a great week ahead, and let's catch up. Like I said, Kama, can you lay your hands on a copy of Creation and its Causes and get me that diagram, please? Given you're in Mehrabad, even if you don't have it.
Yes, actually, the funny thing is, I just ordered it from the Mayor Baba book house. It's available now for 4,550 or something, 5,000
Okay.
bucks.
Okay.
So we can order it. I think it's like probably half the price. It used to be $70, $80 or something. But
Okay.
of course, when I get the copy, it will take a couple of days. And if I get it by 2nd of March, I'll be able to do it, because after that I'm traveling to Jammu Kashmir,
Okay. All right. So
Okay.
are you getting
So
it?
tell
Are
me,
you getting it to
can
your
you tell me the
Mehrabad
page number?
address, or I don't know. I don't know. I remember seeing it, but it's a full page color diagram, so you can't miss it. You just have to flip, and you'll see a circle. You'll see a
Okay.
circle, prominent circle on the whole page. Circle of evolution
All
of
right.
forms.
I'll,
Yeah.
I'll
All
do
right.
that. I'll do that once I get the copy.
Sure.
Yeah. Jai Baba.
Sure. Jai Baba. Jai Baba, everybody. Have a great
Jai Baba.
week
Jai
ahead,
Baba.
and thank you so much.
Jai Baba. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.